I know all the folks round these arts and parts. Can't say I know you. Leastways, not yet. But I dare say I know what you'll be wanting. Some of the crack, maybe. A wee yarn with your sup, is it? No harm in that. Come on over. Warm yourself, I'll warn you, though. If it's the old Begor and Blarney shenanigans you're after, you'll not hear them from me. I'm a Shanachie. A storyteller. True and proud. Well, if such like pleases you, you sit on. I'll fill your ears. And see what story is meant for you on this dark cold night. Looks like your story has found you. I wish it were another. But what's meant for you won't go by you. I'm sorry.
This is the Irish Gothic podcast.
Hello there, Spence. How you doing?
Hello, Chris. I am very well, sir. Long time no chat.
You better believe it. I got my leprechaun hat on.
You're looking resplendent, and my mind's lurking somewhere there behind me.
Oh, I can see it, and I can see it. For some reason, I've got blurred behind me. We haven't quite worked out how to get the blur off, but that's something we'll work on.
My head must have got bigger. It doesn't fit the hat anymore, or unless we've fixed our hats up.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know why they wore these hats, because it's flipping and roasting. So I'm going to take the hat off now, look, so you can see the whole shebang. So this week's episode is part 1 of a 2-parter. Mr. Wright. So, do you want to tell people who it's about?
Well, it's that famous, I guess, warrior god, maybe a sort of demigod of Ireland and Ulster. One of the few figures in our history that at both sides, the political divide in Ireland, claim as their own, which, that's unique in itself. This is Cú Chulainn, and it's often referred to as the Achilles of Ireland. We are talking about the Hound of Ulster, Cú Chulainn, tonight.
Oh, excellent. And do you know what I thought? I thought when they talked about the Hound of Ulster and they talked about all this, I thought about Maui from Moana. Because I know we'll get that later on when he's a bit more, we find out what his superpowers are, but that sort of interests me when I thought, we can... Once we've chatted and we're chatting a little bit more about films, how the Maui is based on Hawaiian legend, which is demigod. But anyway, sorry, I digress very early on.
Because I think like all these things there'll be interpretations of them in modern day that we didn't realize until we start talking about it.
100%. And I think that if we can just get on with it. We're away with one. I was just about to go down another rabbit hole, but this is one of those episodes, and it's in terms of what we do with talking about myths and legends, we actually follow this character from birth to death. And I think it's one of the only ones we follow from birth to death. So it should be interesting. So let's start at the very beginning. With every demigod, even in Greek myth, there's always a human father and mother, and then a god father, so to speak. So was our friend any different?
No different, because you say, like, many of these heroes have two fathers, the earthly, the spiritual, whatever, the god father. She said, it was the god Lamphana, the long-handed.
So he's long-handed god, the old long-handed.
And reached your mortal soil. Irish god of nobility, Lugh the long arm was a master of crafts, cunning warrior, and he wielded it. Get this, there's always a magic weapon, or to wield it, the spear.
The spear of what?
Asshole.
I thought you said something else, sir. You said something else. That was his dad. And then there was a human dad.
Yep, so the human dad was one of the Sultan Makruch. So I'm just going to refer to him as Sultan now, because it's much easier to his surname.
Certainly is.
He was his mortal father, an Ulster nobleman. And during and we're going to come to this in much more detail, but during one of the most famous battles of Cú Chulainn is the cavalry of Cooley. And during that battle, Sultan was charged with watching the border at Crossakey, County Meath. And the story goes that he went to warn King Concobar about what was happening in the war that was going on. but he doesn't arrive till very, very much later. And he bursts in upon the quay and he cries out that the men are being killed and women are being abducted and cattle are being plundered and that the king of Connaught was responsible. So he was there on behalf of his son, going to warn the king. But you think somebody coming in with a message like that, Chris would maybe be listened to? But not so, because he had sort of hadn't followed protocol. No man should ever speak before the king. So the druids said, actually, this guy should be executed. So never mind, listen to what I had to say. They said they're going to execute him. So Cahill's father, he goes running off, old Sultan, falls against the sharpened rim of the shield, decapitates himself, which would be the end of any mortal man, one would think. But they say, this, you like this, his severed head then is brought back on his shield, still crying out. A severed head, still crying out, men and women and children are being butchered, cattle is being plundered, and then and only then did King Concobar get roused into action to gather his army for battle. So that's quite a story for Cahill's mortal father.
But tripping over and cutting your head off with a shield is a bit, yes, like Mr. Bean. But so, assuming a little bit before this, he was born, Cuchulainn was born, but he wasn't called Cuchulainn at that point.
No.
He was called Setanta, I believe.
Yep, which last I heard on there was that a sports channel in Ireland?
It was an Irish sports channel. I think it was bought over by somebody else, but it certainly was.
The story goes that legend has it that she was visited, Declan was visited by the god who informed her she was carrying his child, and he told her what the name of the child was to be. So she says Setanta. So that's quite interesting, a woman being visited by a god and being told you're with child and it's my child. So I think there's some parallels there with stories we may be familiar with.
It could parallel with a lot of stories of just in talking about it. You've obviously got Jesus and Christianity. You've got the stories around that. This is very similar. You've got the Arthurian stories.
Yeah.
I think Arthur's father was somebody dressed up as somebody else. If I can remember John Boorman's Excalibur.
Let's go back a wee bit.
It is going back a wee bit. I think the only bit I remember out of that is Helen Mirren. But that's probably for other reasons. Yeah, so it has all those sort of, I don't know, I would call them traditional tropes, but it has that, his father was a god. Same as, was it Theseus? In the Greek legends, I think it was Theseus. His father was a god. His mother was a human.
Yes.
Maybe it was one of those. It was Theseus or one of those. That probably somebody will call in and say I was wrong, but it's one of those sort of Greek legends as well, where a lot of these, like Jason and the Argonauts, a lot of these things. It was that one was a god would come down and be with a human woman, and then you had a demigod.
Exactly, and that doom demigod thing, man, you get the feeling, as with all these kind of miraculous births, if you like, the child of those births tends to go through the ringer somewhat. Is that doomed sense about them, which is definitely rings true with
there's in that half word where no word accepts them.
So how did he get from being Setanta to becoming the Hound? Because a lot of people may have heard him as being referred to.
I mean, the weird sort of thing was when he was a toddler, he was unnaturally strong. So he outperformed boys that were 3 times his size in hurling and wrestling and all that. So he was special from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But that made him a bit of an outcast as well, because the boys didn't like him that much. And I guess this sort of moment was when he was going to a feast at the house of Cú the smith, I believe.
Okay.
And
blacksmith, yeah?
Yeah, he's a blacksmith. And Cúlainn's massive, ferocious dog attacked him. He attacked Setanta. Setanta? I get them mixed up. We'll call him Setanta until he changes to Cúlainn. He attacked Setanta, and Setanta killed the beast in self-defense. Now, some versions have him smashing its brains out against a stone wall, and other versions have him hitting it in the throat. Who knows? I like to think he beat its head off a stone wall. That would have been more visual with blood flying everywhere, and to atone. Of course, that got him into real trouble, got him into real trouble when he killed that dog. So to atone for the loss of the dog, Setanta promised to take the dog's place and protect Cullen's home until a replacement could be trained. The result, the druid Catbad renamed him Cuchulainn, the Hound of Cullann.
Stop.
So he was, as a punishment, I'm not sure he had to get down his hands and knees and bark at people coming past, but his job was to protect them until they could find a new hound. And then somebody thought of the druid, probably a bit of a joker, thought it'd be funny just to call him Cuchulainn, which is the Hound of Cullann.
Have a vicious chicken.
He could have been the chicken of Cullann. That was basically what it could be.
But yet, violence, but this kind of protective role that he then became this protector of this guy's home. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a punishment that made him who he was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It defined. And also, I often think the Hound, there was a character in Game of Thrones called the Hound.
Okay, yeah.
Who was I don't know whether you watched all of Game of Thrones or not, but he was...
This is treasonous in well, anywhere in the world, but especially in Northern Ireland. I haven't watched all.
Well, he's a sort of big, he roams the land. He's a big warrior, 6.5 foot tall.
And is it in the series, he's called Hound, as I explained, or do you think it's another the other guy?
I don't know. I can't remember whether they actually defined why he was called the Hound. Now, somebody might come into us and say there was a line, but I often think that most of these things come from historical reference. Even if you look at Harry Potter and things like that, there's always some sort of historical reference you can go back to. So somebody somewhere might have seen the Hound and went, "Oh, that's a good name.
Yeah, we'll use that.
We'll use that."
That's funny because the next sort of stage in the journey sees our hero, actually, sorry, he was 5 or 6. He ran away to what was, they called it the boy trip, the Macrad of the main Maca. This is a modern day Navan Fort. Now, it's still there. You can still go and visit it in Armagh, in Killarnat. This was known as the seat of the Keys of Ulster, the Red Branch Knights. But the thing is, you mentioned Harry Potter. Yeah, this is where these boy trips, these elite groups of young sons of Ulster nobles were spent their time training. But Hogwarts, it certainly wasn't. Chris, it was a bit more gladiator than Hogwarts, because at this holy place, Ulster, the sons of young nobles would go and they'd engage in athletic contests. They'd play hurling. They'd be trained for war on the Royal Green.
When he arrived, there was a thing called the hazement, and this had 150 odd boys playing hurling. Now he, being a demigod, got right in there and was scoring left and centre and making everybody look bad. And the result was all the other boys attacked him with their sticks. So Setanta went into what he called what could only be called a mini spasm, knocked out a dozen of them and refused to stop until the rest of them swore allegiance to him. Now, this is the beginning of his special power. Now, I mean, there's a name for it. It's called the Reichstrad, or warp spasm.
Oh.
I kind of think of it like Taz from the Tasmanian Devil. Whizzing round. You know, Tasmanian Devil from Warner Brothers. You can't really talk about him. You can't talk about him without his superpower.
Yeah.
Because when he went...
First day, surrounded by 150 sons of noblemen, gets wading in among them, beats all around him, and not only that, he doesn't stop till they swear allegiance to him. So it's almost, man, this shorten this destiny as a leader, as a king. Do you know what I mean?
We found out later, but when he went into battle, in this battle frenzy, his body physically transformed into a very sort of monster-like look. Yeah. So I think if you're part of those 150 boys that are about to beat up this kid, and all of a sudden the kid goes absolutely mad and turns into a monster and starts beating, you're going to swear allegiance pretty quickly.
Yeah. I think we'll talk more about the warp spasm later on, because it features when he's a man and is involved in battle. But interesting again, man, all these markers about this kind of doomed demigod, we can see them being laid down, because the next thing then in this period is the prophecy. Is it a short life or a long life? And if one day he overheard the druid Cava say that whoever took up arms on that specific day, they would have eternal fame, which he has, but they would also have a very short life. And our guy immediately ran to the king to ask for weapons. He said, believing it was better to live a long, quiet life. Dude, trying to figure out, is it live a long, quiet life or a short, legendary one? And we'll see which one he chose. But
I mean, the druid you're talking about was the one that named him. He was the same guy that named him the Hound. So
spirit guide always was one of these kind of constant sort of figures that appear at key times in his life. So again, is that spiritual? We're talking Holy Ghost here. We're talking. It's very interesting on some of the parallels.
Well, you see, I mean, and then came another problem, because when he ran to the king was happily going to give him the arms he needed, but there was a problem. He seemed to be too strong for his own good. He was so physically powerful that he broke 15 sets of spears and chariots just by testing them. So he would walk up and he would shake it a little bit to see if it was good, and he'd break it down. It only stopped when the king gave him his own royal chariot and spears. This established that he wasn't just a strong kid. He was literally too big for mortal world boots.
Oh, he was definitely destined for better and much darker things. Okay. Well, let's suppose the next step in this is a teenager at this stage, and it's his journey to who is the warrior queen. So we'll talk about that. In his mid-teens, he fell in love with Emer, but her father, Forgal monarch, forbade the marriage unless Cahoon trained with the legendary warrior woman, the Skahat, in Alba, which is present-day Scot. So off he had to go to there, and I believe, Chris, a little bit around the Bridge of Leaps. I think it's the Bridge of Jump with the Leaps.
Well, apparently there is a story that to reach her fortress, he had to cross a magical bridge that would buck like a wild horse and become slippery as ice to anyone who stepped on it. After several failures, he decided he was going to leap the thing and not actually walk on it. So he did what came to be known as the hero's leap, and he landed right in the middle of her fortress.
He jumped it.
So he jumped it. So I think about, you remember the Incredible Hulk used to be able to jump?
That's right, those big springing leaps.
Those big springing leaps. So I think he looked at that bridge and said, I'm not getting across there. I'll just fucking jump it. And jump it he did.
We Shrek and Donkey had a thought of that, mate.
That's it, aye.
Yeah.
So, I mean, once she'd seen that, she was going to teach him. And she taught him, in the end, how to fight properly and how to be a warrior. And she taught him his most famous moves, including the salmon leap.
Wow.
And the use of the gebulge, a barbed spear thrown with the foot that was fatal once it entered the body.
No way.
A barbed spear thrown with your foot. I can only imagine how that looks.
You're skilled. All that just off him, mate. Leaping through the air, tumbling over in a 360, farms spears from his feet. My word.
So now he's a really formidable warrior, never mind a demigod. If he was just human, he'd be a formidable warrior. But he's a demigod. So let's, Spence, take us a bit more into the wart spasm. What's the mechanics?
Yeah, you're saying already, mate, this guy's a force to be reckoned with, but he has that superpower you mentioned earlier, the gamma ray part of his spiders.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, whether he control of it. We'll go further down. Incredible Hulk, you remember when his eyes used to go and he used to and then he was away.
As a teenager, his first major battle frenzy or warp spasm occurred when he returned from his first raid on a rival tribe. And you just sit there and could he control it? The story goes he was so filled with battle fury that he couldn't distinguish friend from foe, rather. So he was lashing out everything against people who were his own people. Such was his rage. So to save the city from him, to save his city from him, the women of the city were sent out to distract him, and they plunged him into 3 vats of cold water. The first vat of water exploded with the heat he was generating. The second one boiled over, and the third one just became just very hot, and he finally cooled down and regained his senses, mate. So it's like trying to dampen this very rage.
I'm not gonna lie, I could do with that when I walk up a set of stairs.
It's when we were kids, we were younger, and there's no word. I'm not saying he had warp spasms. When they were just really unsettled, and you maybe had to just hold your cold fucking tool there, bro. Just to hold them, just to get them back in the, get into that kind of zone where they just nothing sinks in. So it's just, imagine that plunged into three.
So tell me, Spence, was he like the only one? Did he have any rivals or anything like that?
There's a big rival, and then we've talked about the Morgan, and this is great. This links in so well, and we'll talk a wee bit about her later, as we probably would. But he had someone who became a rival in his teenage years, and he's over in Scotland, alongside what he later referred to him as his heart brother and best friend, Ferdiad. Okay, so he met and trained along this guy. He wasn't his blood brother, but he became a heart brother, Ferdiad, and there's a bit of a tragedy around that as well. He swore they would never fight each other, but later, due to Catherine of Cully, etc., there is a heartbreaking moment when they were actually forced to fight to the death.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it could be. Well, looking at Ferdiad, there's probably an episode on him on his own. But that's very Shakespearean as well, where two best friends have to fight to the death. There's all these sort of echoes of other legends in that too. I know we're coming to the end of episode 1, but Cuchulainn was often described as a border figure. Oddly enough, border being half god, half human. A child with the strength of a giant. He was a protector who couldn't control his own rage. That was once he got kicked off. Does his childhood suggest that he was always doomed to be an outsider, even among the people he protected, because of who he was and what he did and how uncontrollable he was?
I hadn't thought about it until now. The fact that his own people had to calm him down for fear that he would destroy them, they must have been terrified of him. And so then you're thinking, did he ever belong anywhere? Was he always out of step with mortal man because he had these godlike abilities and this rage? And interesting you said they're border figure, because he would be someone folks would associate with protecting his own borders. So he's a border figure in terms of his half-god, half-human makeup. But also, even in the geography of where he lives, he was a man who defended borders between rival tribes and factions. So, yeah, very much someone quite sad. He's almost like a weapon. I don't know, like a weapon more than a person that had to be harnessed rather than...
Yeah, like a horse. He was being used he's been used for what he could do. We'll get on to Cuchulainn the man next week, because it gets on to various other things, and we'll probably re-meet the Morrigan next week.
Yes, we'll come back and talk about that heart brother. We mentioned that there was a fight to the death. There's a great little story around all that as well, and we'll take him right up to his death, which is no less epic than his sad years when he was beating the crap out of people all around him. Yeah, looking forward to stuff intellectual.
Great stuff. So, that's it for this week, Spence. I was going to say, I suppose I used to, in the previous episodes, look through sort of recent news and have a little look around and see if there was anything interesting for us. I guess the one thing I haven't spoke to you about is how much of the moon shot did you watch?
You know what? I did watch quite a lot of it. I found myself quite, especially when the launch was delayed a couple of times. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how scared must those folks be when there's any kind of delay for technical reasons? Yeah, I did. I found it really good. I also fell in love with the wee teddy bear thing that they had that floated about
I liked some of those photographs that they got and videos of the moon, where the fact that now it was different colours. You could see that it wasn't just this sort of white sand surface. It was red, and there was all these different, fantastic. And it's sort of, not that I was born for the last moonshot. The last moonshot was like 1972, but it brought back all those sort of, what was possible. And in a world that we are in quite now, which is very polarized, and there are things in politics and things that are happening that we don't talk about, but it was very much a humanity thing. That it was when a feel-good thing at a bad time, which I think we all sort of needed. So, some of those visions, some of the visuals, and you're always on the edge of your seat because anything could happen. They were up there for 10 days, I think it was. And I remember one of the things I do remember watching live was Challenger. I watched it live, and then I visited Cape Canaveral there about 2 years ago.
Really?
Cape Canaveral, it's Cape Kennedy now, isn't it? That shows how Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy. And I saw where the original moonshot took off and stuff like that. And that was effectively, I saw where they took off from there, but obviously that wasn't finished. I saw the big building that they were actually making it in. But it reminds me of the space shuttles,
Yeah.
and it's weird how that trip to the moon felt more like the first trip to the moon than anything else.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying we didn't go, because I believe now the Chinese have actually, you can actually see the stuff that was left.
Yes.
They did go.
Yeah.
It's a conspiracy. They didn't go. I believe they went. I think it's hard to believe how they got there. If that makes sense, it's hard to believe that they could get there.
Time is hard to believe how it happened,
But it happened.
My sense is they were there.
Well, it was Stanley Kubrick, wasn't it? He filmed it in a
That's right.
Stanley Kubrick. But I mean,
And they say there's all these clues, Chris, hidden inside The Shining. There's a documentary, but its name escapes me. I think it's something like Room 237 or something. But they say there's lots of clues. I think one of the clues is that Danny, a young lad who has...
it's amazing. I do love a good conspiracy, and you don't do conspiracies in this show, obviously, but I do love a good conspiracy. And I think the thing about conspiracies is how believable that they're made. The ultimate Kennedy one, Kennedy being shot, and Princess Diana, for instance. I don't think people can't really take in that one person could kill a president. They just can't. That can't be acceptable. They can't take in that a car crash could kill Princess Diana. It has to be something much bigger, because simple things don't kill people like that.
Yeah.
No.
I think there's an attraction about me of kind of trying to make sense. Because in a weird way, the idea of a massive conspiracy to remove a president is less scary in a weird way. Joe Schmo picking up a rifle. Do you know what I mean? Because that just speaks of chaos and randomness. But it's a big conspiracy on that.
But then you had Hinckley. Was it Hinckley who shot Reagan?
It was.
It was Hinckley. So you had this one guy with a gun. It just takes that. Anyway, we're digressing quite a bit. But next week we will get back to Cullen, and we will get back to... I don't know whether I want to get back to the Morrigan after our last episode, but we'll get back to the Morrigan, at least touch upon her. That's touch upon her, not touch her.
Yes. Neglect her, Chris, if you promise. You don't upset the Morrigan. Yeah, have a good one, buddy. Loving the hat.
All right. I'll catch you next week, Spence. All the best.
Yeah, have a good one, buddy. Loving the hat.
No need to look so scared, eh? Enjoy the fire. Have a sup. Sure. Isn't it all just Irish Gothic? All just Irish Gothic.
Check out our other podcast, Hostage to the Devil, which delves into the dark world of possession and exorcism. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us at Irish Gothic Pod on Instagram or X,